I remember blinking back at the monitor, wondering if it was a mistake. Surely someone had sent this to the wrong Kenza, or it was some kind of scheduled system test. I refreshed the inbox twice, then 3 times, but my access was gone. And in that sterile, frozen moment, I realized this wasn't a mistake. They had planned it. They had planned to let me go on the morning I reached 2 decades at Zenith OPTI Core. My name is Kenza Rell. For 20 years, I had been the principal engineer of OptiCore's Global Data Resilience Program. I built NexusFlow, the protocol that synchronized critical communication networks across 6 continents. Governments, financial institutions, emergency services all relied on lines of code I authored. I survived 3 mergers, 5 rounds of downsizing, and every buzzword fad that Silicon Valley ever coined. I wasn't visible. I wasn't celebrated. I was efficient, reliable, and that was my undoing. 2 months ago, the board appointed Elliot Carver, a 35-year-old wunderkind with a portfolio of disruptive startups behind him. He talked of hyperacceleration, sunsetting legacy, and lean-forward integration. In every executive meeting, he repackaged my analysis as if translating from an ancient scroll. He called me the old stack with a patronizing half-smile, as though I were a dusty server rack past end of life. What he failed to grasp was that NexusFlow wasn't just codite, was the backbone of the $3.70 billion Pacific Rim data accord. We were about to close. The termination notice hadn't come from HR or the CTO. It was signed by a freshly minted Director of Operational Transition, a role no one had ever seen before. Legally, it was murky, but at 9:02 a.m., all I understood was the line redacting my credentials and revoking my tokens. My badge wouldn't open any doors. My workstation was a locked vault. Even my phone refused to sync with corporate services. 2 decades of work, deleted with a click. I sat in my apartment, still in the charcoal blazer I'd worn for what I thought would be a routine presentation. The silence was suffocating. No chime from Slack, no pings from email, no happy birthday reminders. My watch, worn thin at the wrist, ticked with mechanical precision. It was a gift from my sister on my last milestone engraved, "Build bridges, don't burn them." I wore it daily through every product launch, every crisis, every sleepless night. Now it sounded like a distant heartbeat in an empty room. I let my hand drift to my personal laptop, untouched by corporate policies. I booted it, navigated to the legacy NexusFlow simulator still running on remote city nodes in Singapore and Buenos Aires. The simulation log scrolled by. All systems green. No deviation, no errors. That core module I wrote in an outdated dialect of Go was still humming, still precise. What they called technical debt was actually a fortress of stability. Without it, any modernization would bring the entire framework to its knees. A wave of memories crashed in. I was back in 2018, in an ambulance headed to St. Mary's. My sister, battling complications from surgery, gripped my hand in panic. My phone buzzed alerts from Singapore showing data packet misalignments threatening to breach secure channels. From my cot, I coded a patch over cell service in 15 minutes flat. We closed the breach before they even realized what had happened. The board sent a perfunctory thank you note. The CEO handed me a token crystal in a small box. But none of that mattered now. In the hazy quiet, I realized they hadn't just stripped my access. They'd rewritten history. They'd scrubbed me from presentations, deleted my name from code comments, reassigned my patents to team leads. They were betting nobody would notice the missing architect until the system faltered under the weight of innovation. I stood, walked to my front door, and slipped outside without a word. At Zenith OptiCore headquarters, my badge, miraculously, still lit up. The doors slid open. Upstairs, a meeting on the 27th floor was in session. Future-proofing data, pipelines. I slipped in unnoticed, gravitating to a corner where the coffee urn steam curled in the air. The screen flashed charts, graphs, and color-coded risk maps. Carver swept in, tablet in hand, eyes alight with triumph. "Thanks for joining," he began, voice smooth and rehearsed. "Today, we chart a course for hyperscalable and zero downtime refactoring." A node on the heat map blinked scarlet. NexusFlow. He tapped it with an unsteady finger. "This relic is high cost, low agility, frankly obsolete." I didn't move. I knew that protocol handled 12 billion transactions a year with 99.9999% uptime. But the room nodded, oblivious. Carver's words floated around me like pollen slick, captivating. but ultimately inert, without the roots that held the network alive. 20 minutes later, the meeting ended. As people filed out, I lingered, dialing into a hidden endpoint I'd seeded years ago, an unlisted directory, a debug console only I could reach. Within seconds, I was inside the production sandbox, bypassing Maria's patch. Terrell's tweaks everything Carver's team had slapped on in the name of speed. In my terminal, I typed 3 lines of code under a comment I left long ago. Sentinel override engaged. The processes realigned. The red node turned emerald. Back in the parking garage, I closed the laptop and took a slow breath. It was 11:27 p.m. The building windows dark. No applause, no alarms, just the seamless flow resuming as though nothing had happened. I hadn't fixed it for them. I'd fixed it because the integrity of the system mattered more than the ego of its keepers. I drove home feeling the same cold calm I had when I wrote that first microkernel at age 22. They believed they'd erased me. They believed they could replace 20 years of institutional memory with buzzwords and charts. But NexusFlow remembered. And as long as it ran, so did I. The next morning, I woke to silence again, but it felt different. The apartment no longer held the weight of erasure. It held possibility. My phone vibrated with unread messages, encrypted briefs from Julian Wells, a meeting confirmation from Boston's procurement office, and a flood of LinkedIn notifications from former colleagues tagging me in congratulations. I let them wait. First, I brewed tea, the steam curling like a promise, and settled at the same desk where I'd scripted Atlas's shell by 8:15 a.m. I was standing in Strategion's West conference room, surrounded by the team Julian had assembled. A dozen engineers, data scientists, and legal analysts. They looked at me with a blend of awe and relief, as though a missing piece had slipped back into place. I passed around steel blue mugs. Our first unofficial team ritual and opened with facts. Not fanfare. Our activation window closes in 42 hours. Every clause in the draft must align with federal biometric escrow regulations. Today, we finalize the mirror contract protocol. Heads bowed over laptops. Fingers flew across keyboards. I guided them through the architecture I'd designed years ago, pointing out each hidden override, each conditional safeguard. They listened as though decoding an ancient text-to-text I had written and they were only now discovering. When one junior analyst asked, "Why hide it in sandbox mode?" I smiled. Because the world forgets the architect faster than the code. Security demands secret layers. By mid-morning, the core team had merged my override branch into the primary repository. Automated tests ran green. We drafted the final activation petition to Boston, embedding my biometric signature and a concise audit trail. I watched as Julian's legal counsel uploaded it to the city portal. A volley of confirmation emails pinged authentication logs, transfer acknowledgements, timestamp verifications. Each one felt like a heartbeat restored. But strategy requires more than code. At noon, I convened a roundtable of product and operations leads. They'd inherited Carver's old playbook, speed at all costs. I paused their sprint planning, set aside their user story cards, and laid out a simple premise. Reliability is our currency. Innovation without stability is a liability. I walked them through scenarios where rapid refactoring had broken third-party integrations, causing multi-hour outages. I contrasted those with NexusFlow's silent resilience. Under peak load during a simulated DDoS last month, the room grew still. One operations manager, Mara, spoke up. "So you're saying we innovate through layering, not replacing?" I nodded. Protect the foundation. Build the new modules on solid ground. Sketches of microservices and diagrams of nested containers appeared on the whiteboard. No buzzwords, just architecture. By 2 p.m., we had a phased rollout plan, incremental feature toggles, parallel run environments, and a rollback protocol. Back at my desk, I opened the draft for the Legacy Builder Scholarship. I refined the language, removing corporate jargon, emphasizing mentorship and autonomy. I added a clause guaranteeing funding over 2 years, not just one. And an advisory seat for winners on Strategion's technical council. I sent it to HR and marketing with a note. No approval needed. Let's launch tomorrow. That evening, I returned to my personal sandbox. The clock on the biometric console ticked down. 35 hours, 12 minutes, and counting. I tested the emergency shutdown sequence, a failsafe I'd embedded to protect against unilateral executive overrides. It worked flawlessly. I took a screenshot and sent it to Julian. ready on my end. The next morning, I arrived early at Boston's procurement office. I carried 2 tablets, one showing Aldrin's voided submission, the other our activated contract. I handed both to the head of digital procurement, Professor Lin, a woman known for her rigorous attention to detail. She flipped between screens, eyes narrowing. "You understand the implications?" she asked. "Once we certify this, there's no reversal." I met her gaze. "I do, and so should everyone at Aldrin." Within the hour, Boston's digital ledger updated. Strategic awarded the $3.7 billion Pacific Rim Accord. A terse press release followed. Contract awarded to Strategic Corporation. Leveraging original NexusFlow architecture by Kenza Rell. No balloons, no fanfares, just a single sentence that bore my name where it belonged. Back at headquarters, as the news spread, I gathered the core team again. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to quiet pride. I told them, "This isn't about vindication, it's about principle. We can move forward with confidence because we never sacrificed the system's integrity." We spent the afternoon mapping out the next phase: automated compliance monitoring, cross-jurisdictional data sovereignty modules, and a fellowship program pairing our veterans with emerging developers. Late that night, I found myself alone in my new office, the city lights twinkling below. I retrieved the framed token from Aldrin, the globe-shaped crystal I'd once dismissed as trivial, and placed it next to the plaque I'd mounted. 50 is not the end, it's the ignition. I traced the inscription with a fingertip and whispered, "Thank you, Maya." A notification appeared. 12 scholarship applications already submitted. Their stories engineers told they were past their prime. Researchers sidelined for lacking buzzwords filled the form fields. I read each one, feeling echoes of my own journey. Tomorrow, we'd choose the first cohort. I powered down the screens and let the silence settle around me. This chapter was far from over. We'd rebuilt a contract, a reputation, and a culture. But the real work lay ahead, architecting not only systems, but the people who would carry them forward. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and stepped into the corridor where my name shone on the door: Chief Architect, Strategic Corporation. And as I walked to the conference room to meet my team, I knew this was only the beginning. I arrived at the office before dawn, the hallways lit by the soft glow of automated LEDs. The campus was quiet, as if holding its breath for the day ahead. My team was already assembled in the West Conference Room, Mara refining the rollout timeline, Ravi perfecting the microservice health dashboards, and 3 scholarship finalists waiting with nervous anticipation. I took my place at the head of the table, the whiteboard behind me already etched with diagrams of phased integrations and mentorship circles. No introductions, no fanfare. I picked up a mug of coffee and met their eyes. "Today, we do more than deliver code," I said. "We launch a culture." I tapped the screen to display the first scholarship application, a mid-career engineer who'd lost her role at a legacy telecom. Her essay spoke of passion undimmed by redundancy. "She's our first awardee," I declared. The room exhaled, and I felt the weight of that moment, creating space for those erased by the false idol of novelty. We spent the morning pairing each finalist with a senior mentor. Mara would guide network security projects. Ravi would oversee dataflow simulations. They'd receive funding, workspace, and permission to fail fast and iterate honestly. "You belong here," I told them. "Your experience is our foundation." At noon, the newswire lit up. Strategic's stock ticked upward as the Pacific Rim contract kickoff was broadcast live. I watched from my office, window. Our engineers glimpsed in the background of the feed, coding alongside Boston's infrastructure team. Carver's name was nowhere to be seen. Mine appeared in the ticker: Kenza Rell, NexusFlow originator. I didn't smile. I just nodded and turned back to my screen. The afternoon blurred in strategy sessions. Legal teams finalizing cross-border data privacy agreements, ops charting capacity expansions, and product refining the new governance dashboard. Everywhere I looked, I saw people referencing protocols I'd drafted years ago, now celebrated, not hidden. Later, I walked past the empty break room where balloons still hung left over from a last-minute farewell I'd never attended. I removed them quietly, tucking each string into my pocket. No theatrics, just clearing the space for new beginnings. Back at my desk, I opened the terminal and ran the final consistency check on the scholarship fund allocation. The shell command listed disbursements, mentors assigned, and project proposals queued. Everything aligned. I closed the console and leaned back, the city skyline mirrored in the dark screen. As dusk fell, an urgent ping lit my tablet. A critical update from Singaporean unexpected protocol handoff causing minor latency. Carver's team would have panicked. I smiled and emailed Mara, auto failover triggers engaged, let's monitor. 10 minutes later, data flow stabilized. No all-hands crisis. Just a system designed to endure. My phone buzzed again, messages from former Aldrin colleagues begging for invitations, apologies, offers to help. I saved each one to a future network folder. When the time was right, I'd invite collaborators. But not today. Today, the network was ours to steward. That night, I walked home under the constellation-lit sky. In my pocket, the crystal token from Aldrin glinted against my keys. I thumbed it once, then slipped it into my coat. Some tokens carry weight only when held. Others carry light when released. At home, I cleared the coffee table of old binders and blueprints. I placed a fresh notebook at the center, blank pages inviting new architectures. On the top sheet, I wrote in precise script, Phase 1, build with purpose. Phase 2, empower the unseen. Phase 3, leave no one behind. I paused, reading those lines. No buzzwords. No legacy weight metaphor. Just commitments. Commitments to systems and to people. I closed the notebook and set it aside. As I climbed into bed, my watch ticked softly. 15 years ago, I'd joked that time was just another data stream. Now, I knew better. Time was the scaffold we left behind for those who followed. Tomorrow, work would begin at 8 a.m. And I'd lead not as an erased ghost, but as the architect of both code and culture. I drifted to sleep, knowing the system would run. The contract would hold, and the next generation of engineers seated today would carry NexusFlow forward. And as long as that code ran, so would the promise that experience